So I got a question from my buddy Mike up in Northern Kentucky, who's actually a good friend of mine, and he was asking about how to roll with lower belts. So he's a brown belt up in his gym, and he's wanting to roll with the lower belts with the intent of making them better, because he's under the sort of the idea that as a higher belt, one of the jobs that he has is to, and one of the things that he wants to do is to build up his training partners that are under him or that are less experienced. And then on top of that, he's kind of coming to a head or a problem where he's like, well, I want to build these guys up, but I also need to build myself up because I'm a competitor. And so he's wondering sort of how to draw the line there and how to benefit on both sides. And so Mike, first off, thanks for the question, brother. And as you might know, Mike, because I know we've been training together off and on for years, I was a black belt with basically blue belt training partners for a long period of time. So for you guys, when I was a freshly minted black belt back in 2011, I just got my black belt. The training partners that I had in the gym were all blue belts. I had maybe a purple belt or two and the occasional black belt or brown belt to roll with, but for the most part, it was almost all blue belts. And so I was trying to build them up because that's my job as a coach, and it's something I desperately wanted to do. And then at the same time, I wanted to build myself up so that I could go compete at a high level and succeed there, because again, I needed to lead from the front. I needed to sort of lead the way in those areas because we hadn't had a competitive black belt that was out there winning tournaments from this gym at that point. And so I had to sort of set that precedent. And so when that came around, I started to do several different sort of little tactics, which I'll share with you, Mike, and they seem to work pretty well. And I've been able to be successful and do pretty well for myself, and at the same time build my students up, build up the lower belts, and at the same time build myself up to compete. So first off, Mike, what I would get you to do is think about when you're rolling with some of the less experienced people, think of it almost as active drilling. So if we think of passive drilling as just doing the repetitions of movements to a person who's just laying there passively, that's passive drilling, right? Well, active drilling is what I kind of consider when there's numbers of different ways to do it, but in one instance is where you're up against people where you know that you can just smash them at any point you want to, but you choose not to because you're going to roll with them for a very specific purpose so that you get something out of it, and at the same time, they're able to get something out of it through the roll. So the first thing that I would say to do, and one thing that really helped me out, was to do all the same stuff that you already do, right? And this is what I did, all the same stuff I already did, and just do it to the other side, right? That seems like such a simple thought, such a simple idea, but a lot of times it's very frustrating because you might be a brown belt or black belt on your strong side, but then if you go to your weak side, you feel like you're a white belt all over again. It feels just dumb, right? Like a lot of times people say their dumb side. And so you want to make sure that your sides are somewhat even. They're typically not going to be even because we're all sort of dominant to one direction or the other, one hand or the other, but if you could at least make one good side and then a comparable side rather than a good side and a really bad side or a dumb side, because that stuff will come up to creep up on you and it'll sometimes get you in trouble. I know that years ago I had a lot of trouble in this where when I was a blue belt, I was trying to work for my half guard. I had a pretty good half guard on one side, right? When my left arm was with the underhook, right? So I'm laying on my right shoulder with my left arm up. And I was at a tournament at the Arnold's in 2005, and I remember there was a big team that was there, and I overheard a couple of their guys talking in the locker room as I was getting dressed for the competition, and they were saying, yeah man, I've been passing to the other side. They didn't say weak side, they said other side. Been passing to the other side and it's working like a charm, kind of thing, that kind of conversation. And I didn't really think much about it, but then when I rolled against one of the guys from their team later on that day, the person forced me into my weak side, right? The side that most people are weak on if they're right-handed, and I was completely just like a fish out of water, right? I just didn't know what I was doing. So he was passing, he forced half guard on me and got me to the point where I would have to have my right arm underhook, but instead I was still reaching to get over with my left arm, and I had no idea what to do, and he just crushed me. And so over the years, I've tried to purposely work on my weak side. And so a lot of times what I'll do with people that like blue belts or white belts even, right? I will take the moves that I already do and just do them to my weak side. It's been very beneficial. So the next tip that I would give you, Mike, is to submit and loosen up, right? So one of the things that I think we've all seen in a tournament before is someone gets the submission, right? The arm's fully locked out, and then somehow the person manages to slip out of the submission last minute, and then that's it, right? So to sort of build off of that position where maybe that sort of situation happens, what I'll do with my training partners at times that are less experienced is I'll get them into a submission. and then I'll let them sort of wiggle out of it. So like once I get to the point where I know I could finish it, right, where I know that I have everything locked in, I'll let them wiggle around a little bit and then loosen up just enough so they can get out of it. And then as they get out of it, I will then try to transition to other submissions that'll lead off there, and that'll kind of give me that ability to have that A, B, C, D sort of chain combination rather than just A, right? And so you can do the same thing with your training partners. Take your best submissions, get there to get them locked in, and then once you lock it in, get to the point where you know you can finish it, whatever it might be. I'm doing a rear naked choke right now, might be an arm bar, might be a knee bar, whatever it is, and then loosen up just so they can wiggle out of it and see where they go and follow them there, because a lot of times you'll find that people have very similar reactions, even at the lesser experience level, right? They have very similar reactions to things, and it helps you, build off of those techniques that you already have. The next thing that I would say, Mike, is don't stop moving against some of these lesser experienced people, because one of the really cool things, and I actually got a compliment from another black belt at a tournament one time, one of the cool things that I developed through the training that I did with my students was a lot of speed, the ability to scramble, and a lot of quickness with my techniques. So in 2012, I had a invite tournament that I ended up winning. And in the first round, I rolled with this big guy, and I remember after our match, we were talking, after all the matches we were talking, and he's like, man, you just move so much, right? You're just all over the place. And so like he was asking like what do you do? Like what kind of drills do you do? And one of the things I said to him, I was like, well, like along with doing the drills I normally do, like when I'm rolling with people, I try to constantly move, right? So along with sort of that loosening up idea where you're transitioning to stuff, I'll just create scrambles sometimes. I'll let people come up into things, and I'll just like flop off to the side to see where it goes and sort of artificially create scrambles so I get used to moving around in a very quick manner. And one of the things that's been really cool is I've been able to develop the ability to like hit weird sweeps and weird techniques and funky angles and funky positions because I've gotten used to it. And so something you can do with your own training, and I know this is sort of an abstract thing, but try to stay moving, right? Like if you've got a song that's going like to a beat, try to constantly like maintain that beat. I actually did that with one of my students today. We were rolling, and I talked to him about it afterwards. There was a song on with a beat, and I just followed that beat, and I was moving around all over the place. Afterwards, I was literally drenched in sweat because I was trying to move for 3-4 solid minutes to a beat of a song. And again, that's really difficult to do because sometimes you don't know where you're going. You're just sort of following the rhythm, and you're like, and this is something you'll have to do. You're not going to be moving with an intent, like a long-term intent, like I'm going to be this. It's going to be moving just to move, right? So I hope that makes sense. The last thing that I would share with you, Mike, that's really helpful is to put yourself in bad spots. Now, this isn't just sort of limited to, bottom of mount, bottom of side control, in the back position either, right? This is also things like, let's say you have a guy in your gym who's like maybe a purple or a blue belt who has a fantastic guard, right? Put yourself in their guard. Or maybe you have someone that has a really good deep half guard. Try to let them get into the deep half guard. Now, don't tell them that you're going to do this, but let them get there to where they want to be. In my training, like right now, I have a bunch of students who over the years have developed really good positions of their own, right? They may not be a black belt all the way around, but they've got positions that are like black belts. Chad has had a black belt guard, I would say, for a number of years before he was a black belt. I had a buddy of mine, Rich, who had a black belt triangle, and I used to purposely put myself in his triangle. I wouldn't tell him this, but I would move around in a way where he was able to cinch it up, and he would finish me a lot with it, right? But I knew that if I could get good enough to defend his triangle, that if I got caught in a triangle in a tournament, I would not get triangled. And there was an actual moment where in 2013, I was in a tournament, the guy got a triangle in, right? And I remember thinking I was so relaxed. Like he got me in a triangle, which is normally a very panicky situation. Like oh no, I'm caught in a triangle. I don't want to lose. But instead I was like sitting there like, yeah, this isn't Rich's triangle. And I was like, I just moved the hips around, got out of it, no problem, ended up getting the submission afterwards, right? So it's one of those things where you can, even if it's not a bad spot, like, one of those really bad spots like bottom of mount, you can still let them be in their best positions, so then you can work from there, if that makes any sense. So, Mike, those are a few tips and tactics or whatever that I used personally as a black belt coach to build myself up for competitions while training with people that maybe weren't at that same level. Again, you always want to try to you have the luxury of having some black belts there to train with, and every now and then coming down to train with us. But when you're rolling with some of those lower training partners, some of those less experienced training partners, try some of these little tips out and see if they help you with your training to both build them up and then build yourself up. So brother, hope that helps. Thanks for the question.